Everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we had Fred Stephen Smith, CEO of Rainforest QA, a no-code test automation platform for modern product teams. Fred, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to dive into what you've been working on at Rainforest for the past, 10, 11 years, and get to know how you've been so successful, what was the early pains, what you're dealing with now. But before we get into all that, what were you doing before you started Rainforest?
I was getting fired. I I became a founder through realizing that I could not be an employee. So I was fired from, I think, 5 separate jobs. And at that point, I was actually being fired from an internship at a VC fund in London. And if you didn't know you could get fired from an internship, neither did I, but you can. And yeah, I got fired because, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. What's the reason?
Yeah, why did they fire me? Yeah, the because I was spending too much time working on my side project, which was the startup idea that ended up becoming Rainforest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a horrible employee, and like I've always had the same personality type. Like I've always been
Mhm.
the same kind of person, whether I was like in the intern or the CEO. Like I'm always questioning like whatever the orthodoxy is. I'm always disagreeing when I think something is dumb. And so, yeah, I'm not a very good employee. So yeah, I was getting fired, and that lit the fire underneath of me to be like, I am not going to get another job where I get fired. This is going to be successful finally, and so we applied to YC the
Yeah,
same day I
yeah.
got fired. And yeah, that was the start of the Rainforest journey.
Yeah, when you say, do you think that your kind of mindset or perspective as like questioning the orthodox, or just, I guess it sounds like being curious about why things are working. Has that always been with you? Is that something that was always festering inside, and that's why you were still working on your project? And it's interesting to hear that you were at these different positions, but still working on this. It sounds like that project kind of never died, and nothing ever
Yeah.
interesting, I guess, enough to combat that. Right? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Well, I knew early on that like I don't want to work from someone else. Like I've never liked authority. I got expelled from a boarding school when I was when I was a child. Like, yeah, I mean, if you ask my mum, she'll tell you that my kindergarten report like was like, Freddie's a very lovely boy, but when he disagrees with you, he will never back down, and that was when I was like 4 years old, so I've like always had this personality. And for me, it was like that intersecting with
Yeah.
the, that intersecting with like with computers, like my
Yeah.
parents just randomly got an iMac, like one of the first generation ones, the like colorful translucent ones. And I was just like, I think it had like a cracked version of Final Cut Pro or iMovie or whatever. And yeah, I was just completely enamored with the possibility to create. And like, I taught myself to code and started my first business building websites. And so, yeah, it's always been this desire to like build stuff. And it's always been tied with like capitalism for me. I've always thought like, oh, I could build something and then I could sell it to people. And those have been two halves of the same whole for me. I was never thought of myself as like an artist. I always thought of myself as like, here's something that people need that I could build. And yeah, I've always been trying to scratch that itch.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and I love the comparison. It's like it's like this urge, or this need to kind of figure out these problems, and solve, and build on your own. And the idea of learning how to code is interesting, because I think a lot of people feel that they have the aptitude or ability, which I
Mm.
think everyone kind of does. But what do you think is the biggest hurdle for people who, want to code, that maybe, you know, whether it's they feel like they don't have the ability once they dive into it, or is it the resources or the access, or is it the motivation? How do people kind of, or in your experience, how did you stick through learning how to code? Because learning complex languages is like learning a whole new dialect.
Yeah.
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 What do you think is kind of the catalyst for you to kind of move past those learning,
Yeah.
those kind of learning curves?
Yeah. Well, I'm a can I swear on this podcast, by the way? Or is it better not to?
Yeah. Good. Yeah. No,
I was just trying, yeah. Uh, I'm a super shitty programmer, just to be clear. So like, I'm good enough. I was good enough to like build stuff and sell it to people, but I'm by no means a good programmer. I mean, I think it's all about motivation. I think it's much like running. I took up running like last year and I became very obsessed. I'm an obsessive person. Like I ran 1,000 miles in my first year of running. Hadn't run a mile in my adult life before that. And I think it's just the same. It's a motivation. For me personally, that's about having a big audacious goal. So like I signed up within a month of starting to run, I signed up for my first half marathon. And, when you feel low in motivation, for me, that's the thing that was like, okay, well, I got to train because of that. And, with programming, it was the same. I was like, I had the motivation of like, oh, I can build a website and like my idea can be on the internet and anyone can go there. And like, I'm like 35, right? So I was like, a young guy when Hotmail came out, and it was like, what? I could contact anyone in the world for free. So I've always been
yeah,
just super excited about the possibilities of the internet. And so, yeah, I think, when people say to me, I'm trying to learn to code, what do I need? I'm like, what are you fucking talking about, man? Like, there's been 20 years
yeah,
of you can learn anything you want online. All it takes is you being motivated. So don't start moaning about like it being hard. It isn't hard at all. Above a certain level of intelligence, maybe you're not going to be the world's greatest programmer, but you could be professional, no problem. And so, yeah, I think it all comes back to motivation. Sorry, it was a very ranty answer, but yeah,
no,
it's all about motivation. You got to understand yourself, right? Some people are competitive. Some people are goal oriented. Some people need, to be tricked with food or like, whatever it is. And I think you have to understand yourself first. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. With most things, it's interesting how people get into this mindset of having to be the best, or and it's just once you're good enough and you have the right
Yeah.
goal in front of you, the
Yeah.
experience, the skill set, it all kind of accumulates to you being extremely good. If somebody, I was talking to another founder and we were talking about just and people are kind of measuring themselves and kind of working for your passion, because a lot of people think, working a startup and being a founder is about passion project. Typically, you're just good at it enough to where people recognize it and it builds some kind of momentum, and then you're passionate
Yeah.
about it. And that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
becomes then the driving factor once you have that. And
Yeah.
I guess what was passionate to you? What were you passionate about in so much or interested about so much that Rainforest kind of conceived this idea? What was the conception of wanting to build a no code platform that helps teams? Was that the original idea, or was that kind of iterations of, of different type of projects or versions of this product?
Yeah, yeah. So it was not the original idea. The original idea was spend analytics for AWS. And yeah, we got into YC with that idea. And then, yeah, fairly quickly, Paul Graham was like, this is a stupid idea. Stop. And so we're like, well, shit. So we started looking around for other stuff we could do. And basically me and my co-founder at the time, he was like super technical, deep into like ops, very back end guy. He was like consulting for British startups who were moving to AWS at the time. So he was like ahead of the curve on the whole kind of like, infrastructure as a service thing. And I was like a designer at that point. Like I was designing websites for people, designing logos. So we thought like we should build something in dev tools to marry that combination of skills optimally, right? Like data heavy, infra ops heavy, that also requires like good visualization, good design. That's dev tools. So yeah, we tried a ton of different ideas. And to your point about passion, like 100%, I think anyone who's a founder who lasts more than 2 or 3 years very quickly realizes that whole thing about follow your passion is a bunch of bullshit. Like it's so rare that that's actually the case, that like, oh, there's this glorious alignment between this random hobby I love plus this thing that can make loads of money. I think it's a huge, huge mistake. It's huge disservice that's been done to the younger generations that they all kind of believe that they just follow their passion. It's magically going to be successful. Like, no, come on. Like you're not passionate about like law as a service or about like building hypersonic passenger jets, right? It's like you saw an
Yeah.
opportunity and you're passionate about building stuff. And yeah, so yeah, long story short,
Yeah.
for us, we got to the point where we were so frustrated with all of these little experiments that we were running, getting good reception, but no one wanting to pay for them, that we basically went and did customer development in the dumbest possible way, which was we said to people, do you have a problem with development that you would pay us $1,000 a month to solve for you? And, we started from the business goal rather than the product vision. And yeah, that was
Yeah.
kind of interesting because then at that point, everyone was like, yeah, QA, it sucks. We don't want to do it. Testing super hard. Automation sucks. Like, can you do it for us? And yeah, that's what got us our first 10
Wow.
customers, our first 10K in MRR. And yeah, that was the
Yeah.
start of the journey to Rainforest QA.
Yeah, that's incredible. And honestly, I hope if anyone gets anything out of these podcasts, it's that message right there. It's all about doing your customer research because you might have some kind of idea, but until people tell you that they're going to pay for it, or maybe your idea is not fleshed out yet, your customer's going to tell you exactly what they want.
Yeah,
And you're going to get so
totally.
much insight onto the direction from those conversations. And I mean, you're echoing like 30, 50 episodes that I've done so far, but
Yeah.
it just
Well, and
rings
to your
true.
point of
It's like,
great versus
that's the
good, right?
easiest way.
Like
Yeah.
so many founders fail because they're like, it needs to be great. And it's like, but you don't know what great is, right? Like you got to release something horrible because if it has the potential to be great, the customer will use it anyway. Like, do you have any idea what the first version
Mm.
of Coinbase looked like? It was like,
Yeah.
like all of these massive services were borderline unusable, but the core value proposition was so compelling that you could tell if you
Yeah.
had the right vision, which obviously Brian did and whatever, like you could tell with so many of these things, wow, this could be so epic. And so this whole idea of like great and, this whole notion of passion, it's like, to me, it's just an excuse to be obsessive about details that don't matter. And I think that's the number one failure mode for
Yeah.
startups. So yeah, I mean, you got to get comfortable with following the market rather than your own glorious vision. Because like, sadly, most of us are not Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
got to learn that lesson yourself as a founder, really.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. A question that kind of, as I was looking through your background and the journey of Rainforest, I mean, you've had such success. It's been such a long tenure that you've been running and continue to grow. And you haven't raised money since 2018. But one thing I
Yeah.
think about between rounds is what got you from, raising your first 20 mil to raising then your second 20 mil? Was it the same kind of product or project kind of sharpened and honed and more strategic and refined, or do you have to kind of take another leap or milestone that gets you to that next kind of point? I don't think a lot
Yeah.
is like, question in terms of like what gets you from the first round to the second round. Is it the same thing better?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's something that
Yeah.
that is something new?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in B2B SaaS, it's a bit specific, right? Because it's so comes down to the metrics. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you want to see the milestone, so it's all milestone based. So if you want to see the milestones, then, I think David Sachs Craft Ventures has a really good, basically table showing you here's the different percentiles. Gary Tanner Initialized also has a similar thing. Here are the different percentiles of ARR, net retention, growth rates, blah, 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 at each round. But yeah, I mean, more to your question, philosophically speaking, it's basically like you're trying to get to strong product market fit. And most startups never get there. And strong product market fit is about your entire energy of the company is spent trying to keep up with customer demand. And that is really
Yeah.
not how most startups go. Most startups try to push customer demand, and you can get very far doing that in B2B SaaS, right? You can execute a sales motion, a marketing motion. You can sell clever contracts. You can have lots of customer success and support. You can basically build a revenue curve, right, by pushing rather than the market pulling to you. And so essentially, when you're raising money for a SaaS company, you're trying to make the argument to the investors that the market is pulling us. And usually what you're actually doing is pushing it. And the investors trying to figure
Yeah.
out like, well, even though they are pushing it a bit, is there the chance that if they get this right, the market could pull it? And so, yeah, you basically, in the first round, in your angel round, it's 100% vision, 0% execution. And by the time you get to like series B or C, it's like 100% execution, 0% vision, right? In the sense that the fundraise there is you give your financial model to them, they run it through their spreadsheets, and it spits out like a big green tick at the end or a big red cross. And then they give you a term sheet based on that. So yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
It's very, very systematized. And as a founder, I think that's one of the challenging things, because you basically, you basically have to build your company towards a model that is defined by like the 90th percentile startup success story. And the problem with that is that Slack didn't get their crazy revenue growth when they were a great company, prior to Microsoft killing them, sadly. But like they didn't get their revenue growth, right? Like all of these products didn't get their revenue growth by like forcing it. They got it because they had such strong product market fit that the market just aggressively pulled them. And they did everything they could to keep up with the demand. And so I think it's a challenge, especially in SaaS, where you have so much opportunity for monetization, where a lot of founders, and this was us, right? In the first 7 years of the business, we didn't have strong enough product market fit, and we overscaled, and we got to, double digits, millions in annual recurring revenue before I realized that the product wasn't good enough to go all the way, And so our journey, the reason we haven't raised money since 2017 is actually because in 2019, when we were thinking about going out to raise our Series C, at that point we raised like $40 million, right? And obviously the next round is another step up. When we were thinking about raising the next round, I realized like we don't have the product market fit here where the market is pulling. We're still having to do way too much push. And so, what I realized was, we could probably build like a mediocre business here, but we can't change QA. And ultimately, every company has a different culture. For us, the culture was, we want to build an amazing product that really solves the customer problem. And we're not interested in doing all the contract trickery and professional services and stuff where it's like, the customer is basically outsourcing the problem to you. Because that's not like really a product, right? Then you're like a services company. And so anyway, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here, but that's the long story of, the last 10 years of Rainforest. And so in the last 3 years, since the pivot, we've pursued a radically different approach. We got rid of all of our sales and marketing organization. We're just engineering, product and design now. And we went from top-down sales to self-serve bottom-up. And we've essentially built a new business. We disrupted ourselves. We kept the old business ticking away, and we built a completely new business with a new product. And we used the cash from the old business to fund that. So, we basically had a second startup, within a startup. And that's been since mid-2019 that we did that. And so, that's been the journey. So
what was the like pivot? I mean, you mean pivot, but it's kind of always, Rainforest seems like it's always been addressing a QA problem. Is it just, I guess, refocusing on, this no code kind of concept, or is it, where was the transition? Where was the change, if you don't mind kind of sharing that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So basically our premise has always been QA is bad because the tools are bad. And the premise has also been that continuous deployment and continuous delivery means that the old ways of doing this, which were good enough for like deploying once every 2 weeks or whatever, deploying once every month, those no longer work. And so that was always like the kind of vision is we're going to build a QA platform that rolls all of the individual tools that you need to do QA into one thing. And then you're going to use that to do QA. And that kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. The first, without getting into all of the details, the TLDR was we never got developers to want to use us because we were too slow and because they were being forced to use us by their engineering managers. And then we also saw that QA people are not the right owners of quality inside companies because they don't have any political power and because the engineers don't want to listen to QA people. And then finally, we saw that the PMs were the right owners of quality inside most companies because the PMs are the ones who are actually deciding when stuff goes live, are deciding when a feature is good enough to ship, are doing the follow-up on the metrics and the user research. And so we kind of learned that in the first version of the business. And so, yeah, the pivot was basically like, look, let's take these things we've learned, which is this unified platform makes sense. Nobody wants to go and cobble together 5 different QA tools to just know whether they have bugs or not. That's really stupid. So obviously it should be a unified platform. And then the no code thing makes a ton of sense because we need product managers to be able to use this, right? Like product managers need to be able to own quality because otherwise it gets siloed into this little QA team and no one wants to listen to the QA team. And so even if they do amazing work, they don't get to impact quality because the developer's like, shut up, I'm deploying and I'm deploying continuously. And so you're not going to tell me to wait for you to do stuff. No way. Right. And like, of course, what happens is something gets shipped that's really broken. The VP of engineering gets slapped by the CEO. The VP of engineering is like, quality is our priority. And so for like 3 months, they listen to the QA team. And then what happens? It goes back to exactly how it was before. So we just saw that like, look, this industry is broken and it's broken because people are building for the wrong users. They're trying to build for QA teams that are siloed and they're trying to turn developers into automation engineers. Both of those are completely unsustainable. And we just saw that through hundreds of different client relationships in the first business. And so we literally designed the new version of Rainforest around that ideology, which is that you shouldn't have QA people owning quality. You should have product teams owning quality. And in order to do that, you need to have no code automated testing because it needs to be fast and cheap enough to do it all the time within continuous delivery, and no code because you need your PMs and designers to be able to be key stakeholders in the process, right? They need to be able to fix a test, understand the results, run the test. The designer, when they're shipping updates to the front end, they need to be able to fix the test as well. So yeah, that's kind of like the thinking behind it. And then because it's now kind of like a tool that the team uses themselves rather than the tool that the engineering leader buys, we've gone totally bottom up. So we went self-serve. We let go of all of our salespeople, even though they were really exceptional. And we did that because we wanted to force ourselves to be accountable to the actual user experience, right? When you do a top-down sale, you're basically accountable to, are you making the right promises and can your services teams get the customers to use the product in the way that you need to? And if you do a self-serve sale, then it's basically, is the product good enough that the user can get enough value that they will continue investing time and money? And, in my experience, it's a much better way to hold yourself accountable to getting to product market fit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And how is that like, what's the success that's come from that shift? Have you seen a lot of growth and a lot of new partnerships and a lot more traction and retention from your customers and using your platform?
Yeah. I mean, most importantly, we've seen a ton more retention. That's the main thing that we've always been focused on, right? Because,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
your job as a founder is to figure out what are the existential questions in the way of you and an IPO. And in QA, one of those questions is not, is this a problem that lots of people have, right? Because the answer is yes. And also one of those questions is not, is this a problem that people want to spend money to solve and urgently want to do that? Because the answer is yes, those as well. So the problem has always been, can you build a platform that makes this painless enough that the product team will own it directly? And that's fundamentally the existential problem that we're in the middle of answering right now. And yet we have super good retention now. Revenue growth is much faster on a month over month basis. It's much more efficient because we don't have a sales organization. And, I think the most important thing as a founder is just that I understand that my only job is to deploy resources against getting to strong product market fit, and recognize that as a startup, most startups never get strong product market fit. And so, we got very, very distracted by revenue growth in the first version of the business. And, when you build something and you get to like people paying you $1 million to use it, you're like, of course we're a product market fit. This is amazing. We're going to be the best startup ever, hire all the people, raise all the money. And so over time, by accident, your whole culture becomes focused on this top line ARR curve. And you gradually forget that the reason for that is not execution of sales, is not pricing and packaging and marketing. The reason for that is that the product solves a meaningful problem in a meaningful, sticky way. And, if you lose sight of that too early, then your company stalls out. And for us, we pulled the ripcord before it stalled out, but you see it all the time in SaaS, right? The startup gets to 20, 25, 30, 40 million ARR, and they can't grow anymore. And they can't grow anymore because the retention isn't good enough, and because they don't have the word of mouth from their existing users saying to everybody, hey, this changed my life, And so I think it's a very, very challenging lesson to learn as a founder. It's very easy to prematurely think that you have product market fit. And I think everyone should go and watch Michael Seibel's videos about this, the current, I guess, president of YC, is he, or CEO of YC, or whatever, because he really, really nails it on the head. Like, they sold Social Cam for hundreds of millions of bucks, right? And he's like, we didn't have product market fit with Social Cam. And like a fifth of all of the internet saw a Social Cam video in a 2-month period, but that still wasn't product market fit because they didn't get to that level of pull from the customers, and they didn't get to that level of stickiness. And, I think this is a real challenge in our industry in SaaS, because people get very distracted by ARR and fundraising. And fundraising is all about ARR growth. And you can force ARR growth. I did it. We did it the first time around, and that was on the basis of like buyer solution fit, but the end user had no fit. And, I think that that's something that is a very, very hard lesson that founders have to learn themselves. And it's why I'm so amazed and impressed by first-time founders that manage to build products that truly get strong product market fit, because that is some magic. Like you look at Brian at Coinbase, that's some real magic to do that, or a Pulver at Instacart, to have the first product you get to strong product market fit and get very quickly to that phase of like the market is just aggressively pulling it from you. That's some Steve Jobs style magic right there. And I mean, for the rest of us, we've got to just work at it.
I think there's so many things that you said that, you see time and time again be very true within startups who are building and startups who fail. And we've seen like, a lot of those startups that, had kind of this old mindset really did fail during the pandemic because of the fragility of their business and the customers they were capturing. But we saw the opposite. We saw other companies double down on, focusing on their customer needs that really, the word of mouth concept's interesting because I had a founder, I'm pretty sure it was Brendan Keegan. And if it's not him, I'm so sorry for the founder. I'm forgetting who recommended this book to me, but it's called Contagious. And it talks about the idea of word of mouth, how much more substantial it is as a funnel for client acquisition or customers adopting your product or service or whatever, because it is a first-hand account of the success of using your product. So it's fascinating because I'm reading that book right now, and it's so much more potent than virality or anything else, any marketing technique or strategy. The word of mouth only comes with good work, and people pulling your product or wanting your service only comes with that that referral or reference from somebody who's used it.
Yeah.
What's the biggest risk for Rainforest QA at this point in time?
The biggest risk is that we can't do it. You know, the biggest risk is that the answer to the existential question of can you build a product that it makes QA painless enough that product teams will use it in an ongoing basis. You know, the answer could be no,
Yeah.
and we don't know. And
Yeah.
like like there's good signs, right? We have a subset of our customer base that have hit that bar, you know, but the answer is still shrug. So yeah, that's the biggest risk.
Right.
There's nothing else, you know, there's no
Yeah.
market risk. Everyone else in our market is building for the wrong people. You know, everyone else in our market is building tools for QA teams or trying to turn developers into QA people. And both of those are just colossally stupid. That it's never going to work. Neither of those work. It's been proven time and time again. Go to every single software company and ask them, hey, how's your QA? They're just going to grimace at you. You know, there's not a single software company that's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's a solved problem, you know? So yeah, we're the only ones who can fuck it up. The biggest risk is can we
Yeah.
actually execute on the vision? And that's all about user experience.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Rainforest?
IPO, dude, obviously. Come on. What do you mean? No, I mean,
Yeah.
the the long-term vision is just to solve the problem meaningfully, right? Solving the problem means that we think that QA should become something like infrastructure, right? The startups don't have to solve infrastructure problems the majority of the time. You sit on AWS or GCP or Azure, and you have one or two of your devs who have a slight specialization in ops. And that's going to get you to tens of millions of revenue, hundreds of people before you have to build a specialized team to worry about that stuff. And there is no conceptual reason why QA shouldn't be the same as that. And so that's the vision. We want to change the industry to be like that. And, you know, I don't think that this problem is going to be solved until then. And it's fundamentally a problem that is going to keep accelerating as our tools to build stuff get more powerful, get more interdependent with different services, and our deployment and desire for iteration in front of the customer gets faster and faster and faster. So yeah, that's the goal. And like the way we think about it, like everything is, if we can solve that product goal, then a massive amount of revenue comes out of that, you know? So IPO is not the goal.
Yeah.
Solving the problem is the goal. But if we solve the problem, an IPO is inevitable, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And it's exciting how, you know, you've kind of used your learning from the first iteration and years of your product and customer relationships to then focus on something that is fundamentally going to be, you know, that much more successful and kind of bear more fruit in terms of, you know, not only revenue, but also just like, I think stickiness is a huge thing, making it fundamental in the development process to use, you know, Rainforest and your product.
Yeah.
I always like to ask this question, one for selfish research, but also for my audience as well. What books or people have influenced you the most? I'll say go with books because you've mentioned a few people in the podcast already.
Yeah. What books have influenced me the most? You know, I don't have a good answer for this because I don't like startup books. I don't think that you can let other people's lessons. I think you have to be out there learning lessons yourself. I think that some of the worst entrepreneurs I've met have the biggest book stacks, you know? So it's not to say that you shouldn't read. You should read, but I think about reading more about motivation. So I've really enjoyed some biographies that I've read. Honestly, the one that's to answer your question in a useful way, I'm sorry. The one that's had the most impact on me professionally is the Patrick Lencioni book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That you can internalize that mental model. Like we did a leadership offsite recently and we literally were like, everyone was forced to read the book and then come to the offsite and discuss what are our dysfunctions. And our team has never been stronger after that. So yeah, 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. That's the one I recommend the most. And I'm just very skeptical about most of the books that take, you know, to your point about virality and referral and all that shit. It's like they take a behavioral pattern you see when you have strong product market fit, and then they try and reverse engineer it as if you can make that into a tactic. And then all of us do it. Like all of us now have a freaking case studies tab on our website. Case studies doesn't mean that people are out there referring your product, right? You're not going to get 10% month-on-month revenue growth by having a really beautiful case studies page. You know, so and like how many books have been written about, how many books are in the book stack about referrals and virality and all that shit. So I may be a contrarian on that, but I wish humans were able to learn other people's lessons. I really don't think in general we can. I think philosophy and inspiration are the 2 real values that I've had out of books. By far the strongest business philosophy that I've ever read is 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. So yeah, that's the one I recommend.
Yeah. I love that. And definitely, you know, another founder talked about the biographies being a huge, like, motivating piece and learning lessons from someone's past and experiences. And I agree. A lot of the startup books, quote unquote, are taking one concept and then writing about it for 100+ pages. And it really just like a sentence and maybe an.
That's what,
you know,
just the tweet is all we need.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't need the book. We just need the tweet. You know? As Naval says, make the email into, like, you know, turn the meeting into an email, turn the email into a text message, turn the text message into a tweet. Like, do you even need to send a tweet? Probably not, you know, but yeah, people got to buy books.
I love that. Well, I love that. Well, Fred, thank you so much for being on the show. I know we're at time, and I'm sure we could talk probably an hour plus and maybe not more, but maybe we'll have a second version of this episode at a later time. But last little bit, I would like to give my founders a chance to give us your plugs and tell us where you are, where we can support. So what are your LinkedIns, your Twitters, your Instagrams? Where can we find and support Rainforest and what you're doing?
Yeah, leave me alone. Go to Rainforest. rainforestqa.com. And if you're a startup and any of my ranting has resonated, then check out the product we have. It's free to use, free to try. You can run, you know, 5 hours of automated tests per month for free, which equates to a couple hundred tests. You know, you can run it on every deployment if you have a small test suite. So yeah, we're still in the phase of very quickly iterating. We're shipping changes to the product every single day based on the feedback of our early adopters, who are all early stage startups. So yeah, even if you're like, this sounds like a stupid vision and I don't agree with this guy, Fred, at all, come and try it and, like, tell us why it doesn't work, because that's going to be very useful for me. And you might be wrong. And rainforestqa.com.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred. Well, I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you so much for being on the show. You know, I learned so much from your journey, from your experience, from your philosophy, and I think, you know, my audience will have a really good time doing this episode. So thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure, Julian. Thanks.